All right, my name is Josue Romero, and this is my final presentation for my Methods of Systematic Inquiry class that was taken over the summer of 2021. So I'm going to go ahead and dig into my chapter 1, my problem, my purpose, and my research questions. I want to start off with this quote from Duke in 2004. He states that the principal who is ideal for opening a new school or improving an already high-performing school may not necessarily possess the qualities needed to turn around a persistent low-performing school. If this were my quote, I would also wish to add along the end of those and vice versa, because there's also many strong leaders in low-performing schools that may have difficulties actually in taking the helm of an already high-performing school or opening up a new campus as well. So my research problem is really going to focus on just the matter in which leadership is developed. And so leadership models really focus on these singular lenses of preparation, typically in urban or rural setting or a title or affluent setting. And so leadership is taught in these isolated contexts, very polarized, and this limits transferability, specifically as we start talking about the changes that a lot of educational locations are starting to experience. So with principal attrition being a major issue here, and complexities of the role increasing and changing demographics in specific contexts, the goal here is really to look at leadership preparation and the needs to focus on leaders that can lead beyond singular contexts or sites. So my purpose statement is I seek to study and understand how effective leaders impact the instructional context where they are placed, including dual context leaders. Additionally, interest will be placed on leaders that have done so in contexts where they were or are the minority. So for this study, context refers to the setting of the school site. And I wish to give a little bit of background on this area for the purpose statement, because I feel like this is a really good time to also address some areas of my positionality, which include the fact that I have worked in these two various settings. And I have seen, just the slew of differences that you have to be able to operate in. Particularly, they bring their own learning curves that you have to be ready to undertake. And, as the saying goes, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. So having served in both of these capacities, I think it's a very interesting topic to talk about, especially because the literature kind of tends to focus on one area, either, polarized area, either urban or title, suburban, or affluent, for example. So my research questions are going to focus on what are the challenges and effective leadership practices of leaders that have served in individual and dual contexts. And my sub-question is, what do they perceive as their supports in their journeys? And then my second question is, what are the unique challenges of minority principals serving in a majority population context? And the reason for that is because, once again, going back to a positionality piece, there is or are individuals who make a choice to particularly serve in only one setting, right? Whether they prefer kind of the affluent suburban neighborhoods, the rural neighborhoods, or the very more challenging title or urban districts. But at the same time, there's other individuals that I feel, just because of my own personal experience, that would like to go out there and maybe give it a try. Serving in a context that isn't what they aren't typically the expert in. And oftentimes they may be overlooked because they don't, fit the profile that's being asked of. And so I think it's very important to make sure that we are addressing the experiences of minority principals within these majority population contexts. So then that way, if there's ever in the future an individual who happens to read this that wants to explore those majority populations where they might be the minority, it would really give them an understanding of the skills that they would require in order to lead effectively in those areas. So chapter 2, going into my strands. The strands that I want to focus on at this point in time are principal attrition, preparation of the leader, including preparation programs, and the context specifics, including the challenges that go with it. So in regards to attrition, we know that principal attrition continues to be an issue that's on the rise. Principal attrition leads to a lot of just very negative, impactful positions on individuals, teacher turnover, which then relates to poor instruction along the lines for students, particularly marginalized campus and districts that serve a bit larger marginalized groups are the ones who suffer the most from this type of attrition. And although organizations are trying to, provide incentives to really curtail this attrition, you continue to see it. And more than not, a lot of times principals are using these more difficult campuses as stepping stones to what could be called preferred campuses. Preparation programs, they continue to be scrutinized. There's been a lot of issues around this, a lot of policy change around the impact of preparation programs. Specifically just the outcomes that are occurring from prep programs haven't, shown a light of success. And so want to address this area as it's going to encompass just some of the needs for change. Now, one of the areas where we are seeing a need for change is this increased partnership with universities and districts to better prepare leaders. But once again, these programs that are being partnered up are very exclusive to the context and setting that is being served, which is an interesting point because even within these districts that are doing this work, they have a mix of populations. They're not typically always all urban, or they're not typically always, all suburban, so to speak. There's pockets of areas where changes can occur or are occurring, so to speak. And so the placement of leaders in those areas is going to be essential, in including the training of these leaders to really be able to wear those multiple caps, those campuses that are shifting from being primarily affluent and white to now having maybe a population shift where white might still be the majority, but there might be other influences or other pockets of other demographics starting to come up and, not challenge that, but really just having a mindful eye for that leader to be able to really lead all those students within that context. Finally, context and changes. There is a consistent mismatch of abilities in marginalized populations. We sort of touched that base in the attrition part. The population shifting is bringing to the forefront the need to have a wider scope of leadership. Areas that are rural may maintain their ruralness, so to speak, but the people that are starting to move into those areas, the demographics are changing, so we need to have leaders that can address those demographics. And then also we know that the volume and the complexity of the role continues to increase and become more demanding. This includes, just the SEL components that are coming down consistently, and always, the academic shifts and changes and the instructional leadership capacity of leaders, so to speak. So chapter 3, my methods. This is going to be a qualitative multiple case study approach. The reason I'm using this is I want to ensure a rich description that can only be obtained with a qualitative semi-structured interview that I'm going to be using. And really we're looking at the success, challenges, and perceptions of school leaders within either mixed or singular context. And really with the goal of trying to take a look at the well-rounded leadership and in the future make those necessary recommendations for the stakeholders. The data collection, as stated before, will be semi-structured, and my sampling will begin within my professional resources and networks. And then from there, I plan to use some snowball sampling. One of the areas where I know I may have a little bit more difficulty is finding minority leaders that have done the work within these two areas. So if I cannot get access to them via my professional network, then I plan to go ahead and start reaching out to various districts, which I know I'm going to have to include them, in my IRB information so that I can go ahead and reach out to them. I haven't yet developed a tool for what's going to be a successful candidate, but I know these candidates must at least have 5 years of experience, and they will have worked in transforming both academic and school culture. So this is an ongoing area for me. Some strengths and weaknesses of my data collection is my semi-structured interview may not be able to really capture additional stakeholders' point of view. So to do that, I might consider looking at climate surveys to take a look at what the teachers' perceptions of that leader are, as well as supervisor performance evaluations or supervisor interviews. Observations and focus groups are not going to be considered. Focus groups with this varying range of leadership would be difficult to really kind of get together and come up with enough questions really in my expertise to be able to handle all the differences in the room. And then observations will prove timely, and I may not always see those skills that I'm observing. So once again, I'm going to use that semi-structured interview for a deep dive into success characteristics of various leaders, but understanding that this may not give me all the point of view from all the other stakeholders that are involved. My data analysis, I plan to use values coding I plan to use this as my first go round of coding, specifically because I want to just take a look individually at each person and the values that has made them successful within their sites. And then I want to use pattern coding to be able to develop the overall big patterns that are emerging from the transcripts, and come up with my themes to then be able to essentially develop a profile of a leader that can serve in multiple contexts. So the application software I'm planning to use, although I'm not very familiar with it, will be NVivo, and I'm going to use this to really help me out with my major themes. So my evaluation and my next steps, a big shift I had to make during this class was that the research presented has now evolved from the original topic. My original topic was just going to look at principal preparation programs, once again looking at the various contexts, but I was going to use newer principles instead of veteran principles or seasoned principles. The reason why I am changing it is because based off of the recommendation of my chair, and also just kind of looking at the way the semi-structured interviews would work and the data that I want to collect, I'm going to get the best data sources from those individuals that have actually led successfully, not just the ones who have had the challenges within their first year. Within my strands, attrition and preparation programs are the constant, but the new strand will include contextual changes and demands. As stated by many in our cohort, we just need to continue reading, reading effectively, reading efficiently, and making sure that we are developing those strands even, in a more complex way to really get to our research question. I want to focus on a framework for resiliency. I don't know any of those that are out there yet, but I know that within this type of work, resiliency is always going to play a big factor, sometimes even over skill set. So I want to take a look at that, but I will be honest, I am not 100% sure on how to truly encompass a framework into the work. So that's something I need to continue looking at. I need to include definitions of success for leaders, and I need to consider documents such as staff surveys in order to at least attempt to triangulate. I need to detail my methods section out. That is one area where I haven't specifically said where I'm going to store my pieces, about what type of reporting am I going to use, transcription information, or software as well. And then finally, I want to have an outline of my strands by my next meeting with my chair. That meeting is scheduled to happen the second week of August. So my goal would be to have that during the first week of August for him, so he can start reviewing some of those outlines, and we can start talking about where we can take our strands and our research from there. So at this point in time, that concludes my presentation. I am very thankful for the opportunity that I had during this time with Dr. Kessa Roberts. And if there are any questions, feel free to send me an email. Thank you so much. Have a great day.